Hi, this is Ross Wright, and I'm the Executive Director here at Hope and Home, and this is our series on foster care and adoption. Today's topic, the 7 myths of foster care. We have 7 separate myths that float around quite a bit about foster care, and I'm sure you've heard many of them. The first one is that the Department of Human Services actually wants to remove children. Now, you may not have heard this, but this is a popular one. Sometimes it pops up on billboards. You'll see it in blogs. Usually these comments come from people whose children have been removed. No surprise there. But the myth is that DHS, the Department of Human Services, and in your county it might be Department of Child and Family Services, DCFS or DHS or DSS, but in any case, the child protective arm of the government in your area wants to remove children. They're kind of these evil robber barons that look for people to make even the slightest mistake, and when they do, they swoop in and take kids away for almost no reason. You hear this, and again, it usually comes from people who have had their children removed, or it might come from conspiracy buffs that also think that there are black helicopters and big trucks that drive around and do all kinds of bad things. Conspiracy buffs believe this one, and again, people who have had their kids removed certainly don't want to own up to the fact that the reason their kids were removed had to do with them, and so they blame the government. In reality, it is very difficult for a child to be removed by the Department of Human Services, and it's the last thing they want to do. I've been working in the Department of Human Services field for the last 30 years, and I know the people over at the Department of Human Services, and it's the last thing they want to do. It breaks their heart to have to take a child away from a family, because they know that no matter how much abuse and neglect that goes on in a home, that those parents still love those children, and those children will be traumatized by the removal. Let me say that again. The children that are removed for abuse and neglect have to have met a standard to be removed, which means it has to be serious abuse, serious neglect, and they will be re-traumatized or additionally traumatized by the removal process itself. So the Department of Human Services never wants to remove kids. And let me throw some numbers at you to help understand this. In Colorado Springs, we're in the county of El Paso, the Department of Human Services gets approximately 16,000 hotline calls every single year. Think about this. It's more than 1,000 a month, which means every Monday morning when they go and start their week, they've got 100 that they have to look at for the next 2 days, and that number keeps going. They have to do 1,000 every time, every single week. Of those 1,000 they go out and see, how many do they actually remove? About 400 a year. So they get 16,000 calls and they remove about 400. It's about 1% of 1% of 1%. Very, very small numbers. What that means is a child coming into foster care that arrives because of abuse or neglect does so only when the Department of Human Services worker truly believes that that child has either been severely abused or neglected, or is at high risk to become abused or neglected. They not only have to make that decision, a supervisor has to sign off on that decision, and they have to wake up a judge if it's the middle of the night, or otherwise reach an on-call judge who has to sign off on it as well. And that kicks in a huge legal process where there are lots and lots of safeguards to protect the child and also the family the child is removed from. The family is given an attorney called a respondent attorney. The child has an attorney called the guardian ad litem, and an entire legal process kicks in to make sure that that child was appropriately removed from that family. So once again, the first myth that we're dealing with, children are removed by the Department of Human Services and DHS wants to do this, completely busted. Now let's go to our second one. Foster children are damaged goods. I hate this myth, first of all, because it refers to human beings as goods, and then we talk about human beings as damaged goods. So I have to be honest, say I hate this one from the get-go. But a lot of people believe that children coming into the foster care system are somehow damaged beyond all repair, especially if they're older. And I have foster parents that tell me other people in their lives challenge them on this issue. Are you really going to bring those kids into your home? Let's squash this myth quickly. The simple reality is foster kids are kids. They're kids who have gone through stuff. They're kids who have had to be removed, as I said in the first myth, because of abuse or neglect, or they're at risk for abuse and neglect. But hear me, they're regular kids. They're regular kids who have gone through tough stuff. And yes, the removal process itself can be traumatizing. but the American Academy of Pediatrics is clear. This is a form of trauma that children can make a full recovery from. I see kids that come into foster care and within a week are very, very normal. Most of the kids that come into foster care are good kids with few behaviors, meaning difficult behaviors, no more so difficult than any normal kid. And let's face it, the process of going through life is challenging, and those challenges make us stronger people. Foster kids have gone through more challenges probably than other kids, but those challenges can have a beneficial effect on them as well. I know thousands of foster kids, and I don't think of them as damaged at all. So let's kick that one right to the curb. The myth that kids are damaged goods that come out of foster care, absolutely absurd, absolutely a myth. Let's go on to number 3. Bringing a foster child into your home will hurt your children. Again, this one's really easy to bust. Bringing a child into foster care will change your children. It will change your family, just like having a child the typical way, the normal way, the old-fashioned way. Giving birth to a child will change your family. Anytime a human being is added to a group of people, what we see is change. It can't not happen. That's an interesting double negative, but it's true. When a new person comes into a group, the group changes, and the group changes the individual. This is the process we call assimilation and accommodation. The challenge to you as a potential foster parent is ask yourself, how open am I to change? And I'm going to tell you, this is the #1 success in terms of being a foster parent. I ask this of all of my pending families. How much are you willing to change? Every time a child or a person or a group of people come together, there is a process that we call in sociology assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is they become part of our group. We assimilate them. Accommodation means that we're going to change our group because now we have more people, now we have more needs, now we have different demands. Foster families who say, I'm big on assimilation, I'm going to bring a child to my home and make them just like the rest of my family, but they're low on accommodation, that's a big challenge, okay? That can forecast a difficult, if not impossible, situation. So the real question you should be asking yourself is, how accommodating am I willing to be of a new child coming into my home? And how assimilating am I willing to be? If you have a very closed family that will not accept a new child into your home, or maybe you have traditions, or maybe you have prejudices in your family that won't allow a child to feel like they're fully a member of your home, that's the bigger challenge. The myth that they will change or hurt your children, absolutely a myth. It's no different than anybody else coming into your home. It's no different than giving birth. It's no different than having a grandparent have to live with you because of sickness or health issues. The myth is busted. The reality is change happens. How open are you to that change? Let's go on to myth number 4. I can't do foster care because I'll get too attached. If you want to come up with the one phrase that upsets foster parents more than any other phrase, bingo, that's it. Go up to a foster parent who has a group of kids in their home. They have a lovely, wonderful family, and they struggle every day and every night to get everybody where they're supposed to go, getting them to bed, raising them in the morning, doing all the stuff that moms and dads do, and look them in the eye and say, I couldn't do this because I'd get too attached. Imagine how that feels to them. What? They're cold, heartless people who don't get attached? That they're just somehow doing it for the money? That sends a very bad message to foster parents. So if you learn nothing else from this list of myths, that's not only a myth, it's also something that really hurts people's feelings. So try not to say it. The reality is you do get attached. Of course you get attached. And some kids stay in your home forever. Some kids stay in your home for a period of time. Some kids go back to their biological parents, and some do that and still stay attached to you. I know foster parents who are still doing child care for the birth family that had the children in the first place. I know some foster parents who become uncles and aunts symbolically to the children in their care. I know a lot of foster parents that adopt the kids in their care. But the reality is you're going to get attached. It's kind of like saying, I don't want to date because I might get attached to someone that I date. I don't want to have a child because something bad could happen to them and I'm attached and then I would lose them. This is nature. This is life. This is the way the world's supposed to be. And in fact, the reality of you attaching to that child is where the healing for that child comes from. When you attach to that child and that child attaches to you, emotional safety is created, love is created, and it's through that love and that emotional safety that they heal and grow. And so we want that to happen. Is it hard? Sure. It's very difficult. But is it worth it? Absolutely. That's why if you're looking for an adoption agency, one of the first things you got to ask them is, what are your supports to help me when the time comes for me to reunify a child that I'm attached to? Because it's not easy. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but I'm telling you it's important. And it's an important question to ask. But in terms of a myth, it's absolutely a myth that I can't do it because I'll become too attached. Yes, you'll be attached, but you can't do it. Let's go on to myth number 5. Don't disrupt the birth order. I cannot tell you how many times I hear this. Brand new foster parents come into Hope and Home and we ask them what age group they're looking for, and they say, well, we have a 5-year-old, so no one over 5. Or we have an 11-year-old. We don't want to disrupt the birth order. We don't want that child to become a middle child and bring in a child that's older than that child. And they quote an often quoted and poorly understood and frankly failed study from years and years ago. And that is that somehow birth order has magic. Now, you've probably heard this. It's probably been told to you that the older child is the more independent child, the smarter child, the one that's going to be more successful. The baby of the family tends to be spoiled and get all the parents' attention. The middle child becomes kind of a peacemaker and is always compromised and maybe is the forgotten child because all the attention goes to the older child and the younger child. This myth has existed for years and years and years, and researchers finally decided to do some investigation into it. They decided to frankly bust this myth. And what they discovered was personal characteristics have nothing to do with birth order. I'll say it again. Personality and personal characteristics have nothing to do with birth order. So the old mindset that middle kids act differently than the oldest kids and they act differently than the babies, absolutely busted. The research shows there's no correlation between personality characteristics and where you are in the birth order. As a result, it means that in foster care, it doesn't matter if you've got a 10-year-old, if you bring in a 12-year-old and make that child the middle child. And let's think about it. How could you take a child into your home without disrupting the birth order? So you bring in a child who is the older child and you bring in someone younger. Now they're in a sibling group. And if we put that child in between two other kids, well, then that child disrupts their birth order. Someone who was the older child becomes the middle child becomes the younger child. Any way you look at it, bringing a child in will change the family and the birth order, but it will have no impact on the personality of the kids. The new child in the home and their relationships will obviously change the entire family, and their interactions with the other kids are obviously going to change who they are, usually for the better. Most of my foster parents tell me that they thought they were giving something to the kids that came into their home, and the blessing was the other way around. The children that came in the home blessed them. So myth busted. Scientific research shows that the characteristics that children have in growing up are not affected by the birth order, and you should throw that right out with the bath water, not the baby, because the baby can be younger, older, middle-aged, and it's not going to impact the kids in your home. Birth order, busted. Let's go on to the 6th one. If a child has been sexually abused, they will likely go on to abuse other kids. This myth is absolutely a myth. Now, what's interesting about this is the flip-flop is true. When researchers look into the lives of people who are what we call perpetrators, and they perpetrate on other people, most of them have been abused. But the flip-flop is not true. Most people who have been abused do not go on to abuse anybody else. And that's a simple, simple reality. Think about the numbers. We oftentimes hear that 1 in 4 women have been sexually abused. Do 1 in 4 women go on to abuse other people? No. Most of the time, when someone has been victimized, they don't even think about hurting somebody else. There has to be something else going on to cause them to want to hurt someone else. Is it true that they may be awakened sexually before they're supposed to be? Yes. That's called being a sexually reactive child. They might be interested in things that normal kids their age aren't interested in. Is that a bad thing? It's uncomfortable. It's not necessarily a bad thing, and we can work with it. Most kids who have been sexually abused go on to be normal kids and do fine. It is absolutely a myth that you have to worry about a sexually abused child abusing your child. My recommendation to you is if you have a child that has a history of sexual abuse, you talk to the agency that you're with and ask them, how much of an impact has it made in that child's life? What is the severity of the abuse? What was the longevity of the abuse? How long did it go on? And what has been the impact of it? I have seen literally thousands of kids who have been sexually abused, and the last thing they're going to do is hurt somebody else. So number 6, children who have been sexually abused are going to go on and abuse other people. Absolutely a myth, busted. Let's go on to number 7. Children who are younger are less damaged, and somehow you're going to do better with younger children. That younger children coming into foster care do better than older kids, because common sense tells us if they're younger, they're more of a blank slate, a tabula rasa. If they're younger, there's been less that could have been done to them. If they're younger, they've had less time to pick up bad behaviors. Something just common sense to us says that if I get a baby, the odds of that baby being, quotes, normal throughout their lives, a lot better than a 2-year-old, a lot better than a 4-year-old, a lot better than a 16-year-old. I hate to tell you this, but that myth is absolutely wrong. It is busted. It is not true. The reality is each kid is individual. Each kid has their own life, their own way of being, and their own way of reacting to the abuse that's happened to them. And maybe there was an abuse. Maybe it was neglect. Maybe there was fear of upcoming abuse and neglect, and none had actually happened. These are the kind of details you need to get from the agency you're with. At Hope and Home, we share every piece of information that we have about kids coming in, and we look at each one of them. And even if we have all the information, we can't read minds. We don't have a crystal ball. I have seen kids who have been adopted at birth have a very difficult time throughout their entire life. I've seen kids adopted at 17 who are sweethearts, and parents have fallen in love and they've been together ever since, meaning as they turn to their 20s and 30s and everything in between. One simple reality is with an older child, you do have a little bit more opportunity to see who they are. With a baby, you don't. So on some level, your odds are better of predicting behavior the older the child is, because you are able to see more of who they become. So the myth of a younger child is better, there's a better chance that they'll be, quotes, okay, is absolutely busted. So if any one of these is the reason why you haven't ventured into the world of foster care, you need to take another look, because these are just excuses. They're not real. They're not reasons to not adopt a child. This is Ross Wright. You've been listening to our series on adoption and foster care. If you want more information, you can give us a call, or you can just simply read the blogs that are here on the list. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a great day.